eNCA coming to you live from the Nasrec Expo Center for the 6th ANC National Policy Conference. I'm Thulasizwe Simelane.
Good evening, I'm Sally Burdett, and we have just heard from Treasurer General Paul Mashatile saying that the discussions are going to continue until midnight. He says things are going well, cordial discussions, lots to talk about. So let's bring in our analyst, Mcebisi Ndletyana. It's great to have you with us in studio.
Delighted.
So just before 5 o'clock, we were chatting about this, what's it, fewer but better concept.
But better, yeah.
So the ANC, it seems, is saying we need to make sure we've got quality people in the party, people that are not prone to corruption, etc., people that aren't just careerists. Do you know of other political parties, whether here in South Africa or abroad, that have a similar vetting process that they're considering?
In China, for instance, they do that. You have to meet certain standards in terms of your own values, your own lifestyle, and so they do some kind of a check. They don't just take anybody. And the problem with the ANC is that you have all these people, some of them don't even read ANC policies. They go to branch meetings, they simply vote without a proper discussion, and then they are kind of urged to support certain positions without them making sense of those positions. And of course, most of them are paid up members of the ANC. I mean, it's very difficult these days for branches to function properly if they are not paid. In the Free State, part of the reason why they don't have branches now, as many branches as they ought to, is because they have these new leaders who are not paying money. They simply expect people to join out of conviction. Previously, they used to be paid. So there's lack of encouragement through conviction, belief, activism, but it's more about material gain. And that's an indictment on the entirety of the party, because that's how the party has simply become, right? Leaders, they use their own position for certain things, so members emulate that, and that kind of sets an example of what it is to be an ANC member. So you need to remove that material incentive, have genuine people come in. You might even have to separate between supporters and members. Members should be cadres. For instance, in 2000, they were talking about cadres, having ANC cadres, having proper political schools. Part of the reason why China has been so good is because people go through proper curriculum, what it is to be a committed communist, what you need to do. Their officials, for instance, leaders, are not appointed randomly. They must have certain qualifications. The ANC is trying a little bit of that here with councillors. For the very first time, they had to produce their CVs. Some of them, to be a mayor, for instance, you had to have certain qualifications. In some cases, it seems to have worked. In others, it hasn't worked.
But Prof. Ndletyana, is this a discussion the ANC can afford to have now, when by its own prognosis and modelling, there is the very real prospect that it could dip under 50% in 2024? And I'm asking you this because when you say fewer but better, it says you need a certain caliber of people that will be in the leadership echelons. But those people may not necessarily be the people who draw in the crowds in the localities, in the communities, who will get you the votes that you need to remain in power. So will this conversation come to zero based on the realities of electoral politics? As Paul Mashatile is saying, we're not going to discourage people from joining the ANC.
Well, I mean, Thulas, if you were to go to a township somewhere and talk to people, I'm sure they would understand you, because you would know what ANC policies are, right? That's the key thing, and part of the reason why they don't have middle-class, bougie people like you is because
oh wow, look at that!
Is because of the screaming in these branches. There's a lot of screaming.
Lumpen within that stratum.
There isn't a lumpen that looks like you. So educated university graduates, for instance, people become active in the ANC at school, this and that. They go to varsity. As soon as they graduate, go to work. ANC branches become uncomfortable spaces to be in because they are not discussions. If you start standing up, quoting this and that, speaking something that they don't approve of, they shout you down, right? So you need to create, and in fact, that is the reason why they are losing, is because the kind of caliber, this poor quality that they have, is alienating supporters out there. So they have to think about how best do we attract supporters, people out there who are watching us, talking, listening to us. So for that, you need people who are credible, honest people to be the face of the ANC, because these other folks who have been there now have cost the ANC a huge support. I mean, the ANC now stands at 47 with these leaders that they have. So obviously, there is a need for a change. You cannot continue with this current crop because this current crop is not impressive.
And yet, Prof, the current crop is out there. 200 people named in the state capture report, some pretty damning things. They are at this conference and speaking quite freely to the media. It strikes me, and I'd love you to weigh in, that this focus on fewer but better, I mean, it's all very interesting on one level, but shouldn't you deal with the most pressing concern, which is how bad do we look with so many corruption-implicated people in our ranks, forward-facing people, people still speaking to the media, arguably bringing our organisation into disrepute? Wouldn't it be a better look if we said those 200, off you go until you've cleared your name? Isn't that a quicker, bolder way to show that you will not tolerate corruption?
That's the nub of the problem, actually. I mean, for the ANC to really grow, they have to risk splitting, alienating certain people, because you can't talk one thing and do something else altogether. And I mean, this is nothing. They are yet to fight. They have to implement Zondo's report. There are certain key people that are there. They have to go against them, and that will really be the test. You can't have false unity, right? And that's what they've been saying. There's got to be unity around certain foundational values. Unity not because you want numbers, you want a bigger tent. Quantity is not quality. The two things are incredibly different, right? So you need impressive people. You need, when someone speaks, you need to say, really, this is an ANC person. And the thing about the ANC is that people know ANC leaders. So they can say, are you ANC? You're not ANC, because they have previous examples by which they measure the current leaders.
I want to take us to Bulele Treaty Jones in a moment, but it seems to me a good point to then pose this question to you, to say, would this fewer but better idea not take the ANC back to the initial criticism or initial observations, let me put it that way, that in its infancy, in the early years, it attracted a lot of the intelligentsia, a lot of the academics and people who were educated at the time and seemed to be elitist?
There is the eye of the needle policy, where they say you don't just choose anybody. You have to be outstanding. They adopted that policy around 2000, years ago. They haven't implemented it, and the reason they are in this mess today is because they didn't do what they ought to have done a long time ago. Leadership requires specific values, skills. Not anybody can be a leader. And I'm sure people do admit that, you know what, I can tell you what I need, but it's up to you as a leader to take that forward. So elitism is not a bad thing, because people are kind of gifted differently to us. Elites are there, they will always be there, and ultimately you do need leaders. People who can articulate these things, people who know what interest rate is. Not everybody knows what interest rate is. So you don't become a mass party just for the sake of it. Yes, you have to be inclusive, consultative, but there is merit, there's brilliance, articulation that is
inspirational.
All these things are part of the collective. There are people who talk better, good orators, but when it comes to understanding the technicalities of government, they know nothing. So you are kind of making a distinction placing individuals where they are best suited, not excluding.
I have to, and I know we've got to speak to Pule, but I have to ask you a follow-up question on that. The documents talk about the risk of moving towards a more authoritative authoritarianism, populism, as we see a growing group of people who are very poor and very hungry and increasingly angry, feel completely disillusioned with the structures that have tried to govern this country. Thabo Mbeki's spoken about the risk of an Arab Spring, but how do you win votes if the populists are being heard because the people do not feel served?
The ANC has to stand up. The sober-minded amongst them must stand up to say this is not practical. It is good that these things come out, complaints that perhaps we are being too tentative, we are being too moderate, we are being too careful. Let's push the envelope a little bit. So you need that talk, you need that clash of ideas and emotions. Out of that would possibly come up something new.
All right, let's go to eNCA.